Hi there, and welcome to Q&Art Live. Today our subject is plein air painting in its various forms, and getting ready to get back into it after too long in the studio, I guess, or not in the outside world. And we are sponsored today by Winsor Newton, which is great because it's the absolute best type of materials to have when you go out there in the field is from Winsor Newton and has been for, I don't know, a few hundred years. It seems like the entire history of modern plein air painting probably stems back to the original artists who used Winsor Newton products. But we're going to talk about that in time. We're going to talk about the history of plein air. We're going to talk about what materials to use. We're going to talk about what plein air actually is. And to do all that, we have a fantastic lineup of friends with us. Here we have David Pyle, who is right there, and Jimmy Leslie. So David and Jimmy are both plein air painters. They're also experts when it comes to all things art supplies. So we're lucky to have them here to share their knowledge and their experience with us. Hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going, Danny?
Hey there.
Good. So
Great to be here.
So, how long have you got, David? How long have you been a plein air painter?
Oh, geez. So, I first started as a watercolorist. I was lucky enough to take a class at the end of getting my BFA in painting and drawing with a couple of guys who almost kind of on a whim threw together a class around watercolor because at that time in the early 80s, that was still coming out of that time period where everybody who was teaching at art schools was teaching stuff that had come out of the expressionist school, the expressionist movement. So to do something that was focused on more natural and representational painting was a bit of a it didn't run true to course. But I was lucky enough to take with these two guys, and then very quickly after taking that class, within a couple of months, I just started painting outdoors. I'd carry my watercolor kit everywhere with me, and that continued all the way into my professional career when I went to work in the art materials industry. I worked for a large, probably in the interest of full disclosure, I worked for Winsor Newton for a number of years, and many of its sister brands in the technical department and in marketing as well. So I spent a lot of time on the road in North America and in Europe and in Asia, and I carried a paint kit with me everywhere. So I was thinking about this earlier, trying to decide if I should say that plein air painting saved my life. That's probably a bit of an overstatement, but it certainly saved my creative life. Or my art making life, because I developed a small little kit that I could carry with me. I could toss it in a suitcase, and anytime I had a free afternoon in Paris or in London, or around home in North America, I could just scamper outside and paint for a couple hours, and it really kept my creative and art making juices flowing. So yeah, it saved my art making life, at least.
Fantastic. So, Jimmy, did it save your life?
I don't know if it saved my life, but it brought more enjoyment to it. It's funny as you asked that question, and as David was speaking, there is a painting up behind me. Oops, where's my finger? It's the opposite here. Right above my head, you'll see, yeah, right there. You'll see a little painting, a part of a painting back there, a landscape, and it's a creek bed going back in space. And I mean, I was really a studio painter working primarily with the figure in grad school and after. And in 1999, I was on a residency at the Vermont Studio Center, and that's a creek bed back there behind my head in Vermont. And I met someone there who's I'm proud to call a great friend of mine still today and a wonderful artist, Bruce McCall. And that day, we grabbed some French easels from the little shop that was at the Vermont Studio Center. And it was a hot day, so we went out in the creek bed, rolled up our pants, took our shoes off, and we stood in the creek bed with our easels and we painted, and it was a really enjoyable experience. And that was back in 1999, so 22 years ago. And that kind of kicked off my love of painting outside. And like David, I've traveled a lot for work in my job for Winsor and Newton, but also it's something I just love to do with my wife, with my family. And I think we'll get into it today. I don't think travels, when we say travel, it doesn't always have to mean that you're getting on a flight or getting in a car. There's travel that you can do on a bicycle around your hometown and go to spots. So near and far. Yeah, but it's always enjoyable just to get outside and experience something new in a nice place.
Absolutely. I'm less of a plein air painter and more of an urban sketcher. And in a little while, we'll talk about what the hell's the difference between those two things besides the terms. But let's start with David, what is plein air painting?
Oh well, I mean, it's technically it's making art outdoors. And if you're saying it's painting, then yes, it's making art out of doors with color. So and that can have all kinds of different permutations. It can take all kinds of different shapes. Certainly, lots of people work outdoors and do plein air painting with oil colors, with watercolors, but it can be ink, it can be markers. I think the whole question about what's the difference between urban sketching and plein air painting is an interesting question. I'll fall heavily on the side that there really isn't a difference, and I realize that there is a bit of a perception that plein air painting has something of a, is it an elitist view? Is it a more specialized view around, putting on the tie and maybe wearing the hat? Although I have to say, I wear a hat when I'm outdoors because I want the protection from the sun. But I think really it's just getting outdoors and enjoying the process of being creative, making images, whether that's in an urban environment or whether that's sitting next to a stream, as Jimmy just mentioned, with that stream coming that stream and that he first started the work that he was doing early.
What about you, Jimmy? Do you think there's a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I don't ever actually think about it as I'm out making art, making marks. But if I had to pin it down, I suppose I would say that in my mind, to delineate for everyone, or to differentiate rather, I would say that plein air painting is sometimes, but not always, these are not absolutes, but sometimes a longer affair where I think sometimes I'm on a train, I'm in a waiting room at a hospital, dentist office, whatever it might be. And I think of my urban sketching as quick stuff in my sketchbook. I think mostly sketchbook, rather than a larger sheet of paper or a canvas. I think that with urban sketching, it's probably something that I'm doing where I may stop at any time because of a time limit, or because maybe the subject that I'm drawing, working with watercolor on, totally moves and changes. It's gone. Maybe it's a truck in the road doing construction, and then they're gone. Well, it's all over then, right? So I kind of think about, and I also think about it's the time limit, but I also think about the supplies that you take with you. And again, not an absolute, but because I travel very, very light with plein air painting supplies. But for me, I think urban sketching, we'll show it when we talk about kits. I've got my sketchbook, a tiny little watercolor kit, and just the slimmest amount of supplies. So I think there is a time and the amount of supplies you take with you. But as David said, though, it's just, I'm outside and enjoying myself. And that's the main goal, rather than getting hung up on what it is I'm doing.
Yeah, I agree.
I generally don't. Sorry, I was just going to say, I generally don't like the idea of ascribing labels or definitions around this stuff. So I certainly agree with everything that Jimmy has just said, but I think it's just all about getting outdoors and enjoying the art making process.
Which hopefully we'll get to do soon, or we're starting to get to do now that it's springtime and there's some loosening up of the pandemic restrictions. I certainly missed it. I've moved to a new city, and I've barely been able to draw here at all over the last year. So I think we're all eager to get out there and to get out our supplies and get back to work. So Now, David, you're often, as our resident art geek, you often know about the history of things. Can you tell us a bit about the history of plein air? Because obviously, it's not something that's been around forever. It's not there throughout the history of art, but it's really something that seems to have popped up in the 19th century. Isn't that true?
Well, yeah, yeah, as a defined process, yes. But as I've just said, I'm not wild at ascribing labels. So if we just say that the joys of making art outdoors is what leads or what can be called plein air, then actually it does go all the way back to prehistory, because the Cro-Magnon guys and women, the Cro-Magnon peeps, they were doing their Cro-Magnon art making stuff outside. So you could say that they were our first plein air painters. When it first became recognized as a movement, however, was the mid 19th century, and there's a bunch of practitioners, a bunch of artists who were credited with having been early plein air paintings. You've got J.M.W. Turner, you've got Jean Baptiste, and I included him in part because he was a great painter, but also because I just love saying his name. You've got John Constable, you've got John Singer Sargent. So again, early, mid, late 19th century, those people were credited with first bringing attention to the idea of getting outdoors with paints an identifiable process. It really, however, dates to the invention of the collapsible tube. And the invention of the collapsible tube was the first patent was 1841 or 1842, depending upon who you talk to or where you look it up. It was patented in London by an American by the name of John Goffey Rand. And Rand was the first one who played with a syringe and then a collapsible tube and patented it. And it's actually worth noting this because it was Winsor and Newton who purchased that patent. So Winsor and Newton often claims, and I think rightly so, to have been the first manufacturer to bring out the collapsible tube. And it was that collapsible tube that allowed painters to grab stuff, put it in a box or a bag, get outdoors, because prior to the collapsible tube, paint was either just produced on a pallet in the studio, or it was stored in pig bladders. And pig bladders are messy and stinky and not pleasant, particularly for the pig. So once the collapsible tube was made, then indeed it became much easier to get outdoors, to enjoy that process. And I think you can ultimately credit the Impressionist movement being as a result of the collapsible tube.
So, Jimmy, where are you getting your pig bladders these days?
My pig bladders are the local organic farm, Danny. That's where I get mine. And yeah, David's right. They're a little bit stinky and hard to work with. I like a tube.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we think about Impressionists and we think about, Monet going out and painting haystacks or, painting the cathedral and so forth, we don't think of the idea of him going out with a stack of canvases and his painting box and being able to actually do that. It's something that in the history of art, we always think of artists in the studio. If we think about them having paint, it's often pigment that they're grinding up and essentially making their own paint in the studio. But really, when commercially available art supplies became available, that really revolutionized how painters worked, but also what they painted. So it's no longer just in the studio with a model. Let's say it's the opportunity to go anywhere in the world and feel free to create. So that makes a big difference, and that's really what we're doing now. Let's talk a bit about what we use now that we have collapsible tubes. First of all, you guys are both essentially watercolor painters, or Jimmy's case, you're also an acrylic painter, but you're a painter first and foremost when it comes to doing this sort of stuff. So presumably taking out paints is a key part of it, but there's also a lot of other stuff that we need when we're painting. And it would be fascinating for each of you to take us through your personal kits and explain what you're using and why you've chosen the particular things that you're using. You guys game for that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
All right, good. So Jimmy, let's start with you.
Sure.
Jimmy, you have we have an extra camera for you,
I
so
do. I
you,
do.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we
So
can see. Yeah.
this is my sort of, when I was saying before, if we had to pin down the difference between plein air and urban sketching, this is my sort of go-to everyday kit. It's just a Army Navy bag. It's small. I mean, you can see it's the size of my hand roughly, and in here I've got my sketchbook. So I've got that. I've got a Winsor Newton fine liner. I have a few more of those in there. This happens to be this one happens to be gray, but I think I have a sepia and a black in there. I've got my sketchbook here. So if I really, I mean, this kit is small as it is, but really, if I knew I was just running to the dentist office and I might be sitting 10 minutes, because my dentist was pretty good about getting me in there on time, I might just take the pen and this sketchbook, which can fit in my back pocket. I mean, that's how small it is. And that really enabled, because I know in a situation like that, in a dentist, doctor's office or something like that, in 10 minutes, I'm probably not going to break out any color because they're going to call me at a moment's notice. So that gives me the opportunity to work quickly in a sketchbook, and just kind of play with concepts and ideas and work quickly. So I've got that in there. I've got a pencil. I've got a little mechanical pencil in there as well. If I want to sketch things out in pencil, I have two. I didn't realize that. I've got my black fine liner as well. And then my little watercolor kit is in here. And this is an old Winsor Newton enamel kit. And they actually don't make this one anymore. So I'm pretty protective of it. People often ask me where they can get it, and they can't anymore. But this nice little thing, you've got your water carrier right here, or your water receptacle. You can actually carry water in it like a flask, or should you choose it as a flask? I'm not going to judge you. Yeah, you could do that too. maybe a little bit of vodka in there in cold weather to help your paints from not freezing. But this clips right on here as well. There is a ring on the back of that if you wanted to hold that like so. And that's got 12 little pans. And just for any and my palette here, and for anyone who might not be aware, the pans and the tubes, so these are all Winsor & Newton pans, and the pans and tubes are made to the same high quality standards. They still go through light fastness testing. They're still using the best quality pigments and such. You've just got the ready to go here with the pans. And again, I like this for quick things because I'm not taking a cap off of a tube. I'm dropping that. I'm losing that. I'm squeezing out more than I need. Just makes it super, super quick. Let's see what else I have in here. If I need a little bit more room, I've just got this, I think it's like a melamine or a plastic. I've got this other little palette. Although I can't say I've ever used that in a long, long time. It might be a situation where I get more involved than this year because I do have more time, but that's in there. I think that's about it in there. In the side pockets, I do have, because I paint a lot in gouache, I do have some primary colors in gouache. Again, for anybody not familiar, gouache is simply an opaque watercolor. So I have those if I want to get some opaque passages, and I've got a white as well. And I think in my other pocket, if I remember, yeah, in my other pocket, I've got a kneaded eraser for all the massive mistakes that I make. And then if I put that aside, my more expanded kit, let's call it, and I'll grab it here, pardon me, is this one right here. And this opens up, it's got tons of stickers on it. This one opens up, and I'm going to bring my camera back a little bit more for you so you can see this better. So this whole kit opens up. So it's got a little leather strap in the front that unsnaps. The side cranks open like this, and it lets me slide the kit open. So I have an area to put my watercolor pad or panel or whatever it is that I have right there. And then it opens up. And this is a nice little area. So if I have my brushes, I can slide those in there, and that will allow me to have those stand up there. And then this slides out. So it's like this little secret compartment. This is cool. This is my palette here. And if I pop that open, the top becomes your palette right here that I can mix on, that I can set off to the side. And I've got my colors in here. And I basically, this is my gouache palette. So this is basically a warm and cool red, a warm and cool yellow, warm and cool blue. And then I do have some secondary colors in there. And the sponge is simply because I have a little water bottle and I can spritz that like that, almost like a cigar humidor. And when I seal this up, that'll keep those moist. I use this quite often, but quite frankly, I've come back a week later if I haven't used it and they've still been moist. So that's actually quite nice. And then the rest of my kit is this collapsible water carrier. You can buy stuff anywhere. I've seen people use collapsible dog bowls, which is really cool. I've got a rag that's really well worn. Don't tell the Marriott Corporation. I think it might have come from them. But they don't want this back, I'm pretty sure. But I like a rag just instead of wasting paper towels if I can. And then last but not least, I've got I've got a white piece of charcoal here instead, or a white pencil in case I'm working on a toned ground. And then I've got a few extra colors, but I've got some watercolor tubes in there if I need anything. If I need to scrape off my palette, got one of these little widgets with a razor blade in there, which should have be careful everyone, that should have a protective cover on it. And then I've got my brushes too, and I like these things called brush tubes. These are cool. They look like little test tubes, right? But you actually take your brush and you can slide it in here like this. Is cool. Yeah, and then you can put that right in here, and that keeps them from getting all dinged up. This one has the original plastic end that comes on it, so that's not that big of a deal. But yeah, these are kind of neat. And these come from the company, which I think David's going to show us in his kit, but Gorilla Painter, and they make a lot of good supplies. And the front of this has a leather handle. I keep some tape if I want to tape off edges of my watercolor pad that I'm working on. And this let me just, one last thing, and I'll pass the baton over to David. I'll close this up real quick to show you the bottom. And the reason I want to show you that is because the bottom has a shoe, which we call a shoe mount for a photographer's tripod. So I can click this into place on there. And that's what I use with me. I take a collapsible, with the telescopic legs. And then all of that, if I show you and pull back a little bit more, all of that stuff, both my tripod and this kit, all go in this bag, which is a dry bag. So everything can go in here, and this bag can roll down like such. And I clip once I roll it correctly. I'm not doing that now, but you clip that, and it's got a little expandable thing. So if I'm caught in any sort of rainy situation, being a dry bag, everything's protected in there. And that's basically my kit in a nutshell.
Did you develop this kit over years? Are things always coming in and out of your
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, stuff does make its way in and out a little bit, but this is pretty standard by now. And you're absolutely correct, Danny, to ask the question: is it developed over years? Yeah, there's been other things I've used. For instance, the bag is just a duffel. It's got no pockets. Now, a lot of people love pockets, which totally makes sense. And I used to have a bag that had a ton of pockets. For me, though, I can never remember what I put in what pocket. So I spent more time opening and closing pockets. And because I don't carry a lot of stuff and pretty much everything is contained in that box, I don't have to worry about it with the bag. But, same thing with supplies, too. I think you meet different people who use different palettes and little different materials. And you say, wow, that's really cool. What are you using that, and why are you using that? And things change. I think things change over time, develop over time, based on your working methods as well, and what's convenient for you. And to me, that's always the thing that gets me to be outside more, is that it's all convenient and it's easy to grab real quick and go.
So speaking of sort of changing and adapting your kit, can you go in and talk about your palette and tell us what your paints are, how you've chosen what you have, and how much that
Yeah.
changes? Yeah.
Yeah, so in the kit that I have right here, this is a permanent rose, which is a quinacridone magenta. This is a cadmium red medium. So this tends to be a bluer red. This tends to be a warmer red there. It's really when you have a warm and cool red, a warm and cool yellow, and a warm and cool blue, as I do over here. That's what you call a split complementary palette. So they're all complementary colors. One's cool, one's warm, and I really think a great deal of a convincing mood in a work has a lot to do with getting the temperature right, the feel, and I think we know that just as people looking outside, sometimes we think to ourselves, oh, it looks so cold out today, or it looks so warm. We get a feel like that. I do have some secondary colors. This is a cadmium free red scarlet, which moves more towards an orange. And then I do have an orange right there. I've got a Winsor lemon. That's my cool yellow. Cadmium free yellow pale. That's my warm. This is permanent green middle. This one's got a little bit of more of a designer name. It's a sky blue, which is an ultramarine, is one of the pigments in there. And then I do have an ultramarine blue, which is a warm, more reddish blue. And when we think about that, with the more reddish ultramarine blue, when I mix that with a magenta that is already moving towards blue, they're working together to make a violet. They're friendly. They're working together to make a violet. And if I was trying to make a violet and I was mixing the ultramarine blue again that moves towards red, and then the red here that moves more towards yellow, yellow being the complementary color of violet, they're gonna fight each other. It's not that you won't get a violet, you just won't get the vibrant one that you might expect. And then I have a cerulean blue and a cobalt blue right there, and that's and a titanium white, of course. And that's not to say, Danny, that I don't have other colors in the box that I might grab from, but that's sort of a core for me. And then your question about what might come in and out if I'm going to a specific location, and I think, oh, there's a color. If I was going to be in the Caribbean, let's say, I'm going to
Right.
grab a cobalt teal, probably. You got it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my question, which is this your New Jersey kit? Because that's where you live. Or,
Right,
and
right.
I mean, because I have memories of going to different places, going to Italy, let's say, going to Tuscany, where the skies they're a different color than they are in New Jersey, but also the vegetation is different. The colors are different. You see a lot of sun-baked landscapes with dark green cypress trees and orange tile ceramic roofs and white walls. So you have a different kit depending on where you
Yeah.
go, or do you feel like the setup that you have right now will allow you to basically negotiate any terrain and come
I
over the
can
colors you need
mix
to
a
do?
lot out of that for sure. However, you mentioned Italy, which is one of my favorite places to travel, and my wife as well. It's hands down one of our favorite places that we go back to again and again. And yeah, you think of a cypress tree and you think of that bluish green. So I might have a viridian in the mix, although I could get pretty close with what I have here. But I can't imagine though, not going to Tuscany and not having umber, Sienna. I mean, they're the names of towns there. How can you not bring those, right? So, and that's the beauty, I think, of having a compact kit like this. In the well of that kit that I opened up for you, aside from what's in the palette, I could fit a bunch of other little small tubes that aren't really going to add a whole lot of weight. So yeah, I 100% agree with you, Danny. There's a romance to grabbing a color that reminds you of a specific place and puts you in the mood.
Right, fantastic. Well, good. So David, let's talk about your kit. And I know you actually have a variety of different setups, right? Different kits.
I do. So, and I'm going to start. Although I think Jimmy and I approach it in some ways that are very similar. So he started with his minimalist kit and then went to his full kit. I'm going to start with my full kit and go to my minimalist kit. So we're going to do this exactly backwards. Let me switch over. So you should be able to see my box now, right? Okay, so I've got the same box that Jimmy does for my full size kit. This is a Gorilla Painter box. I love this box. I've got it for 20 years. Very, very sturdy. And the question that you asked at one point, Danny, around, did you do you carry more, or have you carried more or refined this as you've gone along? What I have in this box is probably a quarter of what I used to carry. So I about 10 years ago, I decided, I'm going to confine myself to the size of the box that I'm taking out with me. So this is my full kit. I can toss this in the back of the car, put it on a tripod, either take seating with me if I want to. If I'm going out just for painting, I'll take this. If I'm traveling and I want to go very light, then I've got a small bag where I've got a smaller kit too. I'll show you that in just a sec. But this is my full-size kit. So I've got my Gorilla Painter box. I've got a palette here. And then I pull this open, is that I will not take with me anything that I can't get in the box. And I've got all this organized very specifically. So here's those test tube type things are really clever that Jimmy's got for his brushes. I've got one of these old style bamboo wrap ups that I use for brushes. These are all the brushes that I typically will use. Some of them are much more specialized than others. The three that I use the most are these three right here. So this is a size 9 round. Let me mix it here. Size 9 round Kolinsky Sable. I've got a size 7 and I've got a size 4. These are with the size 9. I can get a nice big broad wash. With the size 7, that's the brush that I use more than any because it's a really good quality brush. And you'll see it goes to a very fine point. Actually, let me do this one. I've got 2 size 7s in here. It goes to an incredibly fine point and gives me all the reservoir capacity in that big belly behind it. And then if I'm really going to go fine detail, I've got a size 4 that also will give me a fine point too. But actually, this size 7 with a really, really good quality brush, it gives me just about everything I need. Although I'll use this larger one for big washes. And then the other ones, I've got this one if I'm working really big for a big wash, and I've got some others that I just use for some specialized purposes. Funny that when we start to talk about color, there's that whole question about tubes versus pans. Jimmy and I have arrived at much the same solution. Look what I've got in here. I've got one of the
there you go.
Those little tiny kids too. I love this. What I use more than anything, however, are these. These are some of the larger porcelainized, not personalized, but porcelainized. This is a metal carrying box that has had porcelain baked onto it, which makes for a fabulous palette. When I'm working outdoors, I will work almost exclusively with pans just because they're so compact, they're easy to carry, and as Jimmy has said, a really good quality pan color is the equal in virtually every way to a really good quality tube color. The thing you can't get with pans that you can get with tubes is you can sploosh out a big giant amount, which if I'm working really large in the studio, then I'll use tubes. But when I'm typically when I'm outdoors painting, the largest I'll go is 14 by 20, 16 by 20 with a large area of color, and a good quality pan color gives me enough color intensity and color depth and all the qualities I'm looking for that I can work a large area with these pans. You'll also notice that, boy, do I use the palettes that are part of these as well. A good quality color has enough integrity to it that I can spread some color on here and it'll keep its essential character, its essential personality, and not pick up some of the colors from the other pigments that may be on here as well. But sometimes I get surprises like that, and I like it. Also, rags. I've got a couple of them in here. Underneath, you'll see that's where I've got all my pencils. And similar to Jimmy, I've got my little collapsible water jar. Again, this is another one I've had probably for 20 years, maybe even 30 years. It's great. Over here, I do keep a few tubes that maybe colors that I don't have in pans. And I always carry, business cards. I found last summer when I was out doing lots of painting, I was painting just about every morning and every evening outdoors in an area where there was a fair amount of traffic. I had people stop, and I had a couple of people stop and want to buy paintings. So I quickly made certain that I had my business cards in my kit, in my box, so I could give my contact information and people could see my website. And I sold a couple of nice paintings last summer just because of that. So that's my full size kit. Same thing, put it on a tripod. I then have my small kit. This is if I want to just toss, I want to have something I can toss into a suitcase, because the big box I can't toss in a suitcase. All right, good, but it's tough to get much of anything else in it. So with this, I've just got a small sling bag that I can sling over my shoulder. I can get one of these in it. I can get a small watercolor block if I want that, or I can carry the watercolor block separately because it's flat. I can get in my brush roll up. I can get in this, my collapsible water tin, and a couple of pencils and a rag, and boom, I'm ready to go. So this is small, it's simple, it's easy. If I've got an extra hour, I can sling this over my bag to go out and stand next to a bridge or stand next to an interesting building and do a quick painting. So yeah, so that's my kit. Is that anything else you want me to talk about with that, Danny?
Do you want to talk about your colors?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. So Jimmy, I guess there are a couple of things that I'll add to Jimmy's comments. Jimmy certainly knows what he's doing. I have 15 colors that I carry. The core of it are those colors that Jimmy has just mentioned. So there's a couple of red, so warm and cool reds, and warm and cool with each of the primaries. There are also some colors that I carry that for very specific reasons and to take advantage of the unique properties of that come with a really good quality watercolor. So there are some colors that I carry because I want to have an opaque color, and I want to have a transparent color in each of the primaries and maybe some secondaries. And we've talked about that before with some of the sessions that we've done, that some pigments by their very nature are opaque. You look at them through a microscope, it's like trying to look through a rock. There are some that are highly transparent. You look at them through a microscope and it's like looking through stained glass. So both of those bring different properties to this. So I always carry an opaque version and a transparent version. And I also carry some colors that are granulating because I love that chunky texture that you can get, like with a cobalt blue or a cobalt blue deep. There's also a couple of colors that I carry just because I love them, and those are the perylines. So perylene is a contemporary pigment. It's a synthetically derived pigment. And there's perylene green and perylene maroon, or perylene violet. I sometimes will use the maroon and the violet interchangeably. But both of those, if you mix them, you get a deep, dark black that is unlike anything else I've ever seen. And you can, by varying it with adding a little bit more of the maroon or adding a little bit more of the green, you can make it a dark black, or a warm black or a cool black. I also always carry burnt umber and ultramarine, knowing that I'm going to want to mix those. Same thing. If I add, and they almost mix 1 to 1, you add 1 part burnt umber and 1 part ultramarine, you get a really nice, deep, rich gray. And if you add a little bit more burnt umber, it's a warm gray. If you add a little bit more ultramarine, it's a cool gray. So those are colors that I carry for some specific purposes, in addition to that core group of primaries that Jamie also mentioned.
All right, excellent.
Danny, if I could add a few points to that was great. I'm glad you mentioned that, David. Ultramarine blue and burnt umber. If any of you haven't used those two, mixed those two together, go take David's advice and do that. It does make this beautiful gray that you can make chromatic, either warm or cool. And just the other thing I wanted to mention that David said, and I'm so glad you brought it up, David, is the transparent and opaque nature of the colors that you're carrying. So if we're talking about watercolor, I think a lot of times people, because of the often very thin wash of color that we put down with watercolor, I think a lot of people don't think about it being opaque. But your really long names like quinacridone, phthalocyanine tend to be your more transparent colors, where your cadmium colors tend to be more opaque. So yeah, do read your labels and do make note of that. And I would say in your sketchbooks, make little swatches. You could put a little pencil line and lay a cadmium over that compared to a quinacridone, and you'll see what David's talking about there. So those are just kind of two great points. I wanted to kudos to David for bringing those up.
I guess I'll just quickly go through mine again. I don't have any wooden boxes. I feel. How heavy are those boxes, by the way? How much of a big deal is it to schlep around?
Depends what you put in it. I don't know what mine is. I don't know. I can hold it like that without it being a stressor. Maybe it's 3 pounds, 4 pounds.
That's it. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it's not overly heavy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the boxes themselves. I think I think these are ash. If I remember correctly,
so, yeah.
having talked with the guy who made them. So it's a hardwood, but it's not a heavy wood. It's not like they were made of oak or something like
Right.
that. So they're very compact. The boxes themselves, for their size, are pretty lightweight. So yeah, what's really going to determine with the mass that you're lugging around is how much stuff that you put inside. Again, I don't, if I'm just going out to paint, I find these really easy to manage. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, I use a backpack, and this is this Japanese backpack I have that has lots and lots of little pockets. So unlike Jimmy, I like pockets. Generally because I'm scrounging around trying to find something, and I like knowing that things are in a certain area. So this is a fairly good friend to me. I'll unpack a little bit of it and just quickly show you what's in here. Yeah, so obviously pens. This is my pen kit. I have a lot of Winsor Newton fine liners. I also have these watercolor markers. So it's a marker, but it's watercolor. And it's nice, even if you just carry a couple of them, it's have them in, like this is a heavy black one, but again, you can do a fine end to it. But honestly, with those colors, you can kind of capture a lot of stuff. If you have that, then you have a gray fine liner, blue. I always feel like having fewer art supplies is not a bad idea because it forces you to be creative and to figure out what you should use. I'm also kind of at the low end of art supplies. We'll talk about quality in a little bit, and I'd love to hear you guys kind of talk about that a bit. But for me, something like this, which is basically a plastic brush with water inside, it's really convenient, and I use these a lot. They're made by Pentel, and this is going to be sort of strange, but this is one of the versions of my watercolor kit, which is basically it's a little tiny watercolor kit. As you can see, that's how big it is in my hand, and I can put this right in my pocket. So even if I don't have my backpack with me, I can take this, and I can take this, and I can take a fine liner, and I can even have my tiny sketchbook. So basically I can stack everything up. I can literally put all this in my jeans and walk around with it. So I can do anything there, and I can, do watercolors easily there. So I can knock out that watercolor with that gear that I just showed you. So there's that. That's on the minimalist end of things. I often will have a larger, like this is a Hanamura sketchbook. And I also have two different, this is my old Winsor Newton field kit. and this is my newer one. This is fatter. This is slimmer. This is probably cleaner. But you know, it's a nice set because it has basically a little palette that you can pop out. You can even fit a little tiny brush in there, and I think it also has it has this little thing that I think hangs off the side, and then you can also put your thumb through. Although I never really have, but you can somehow put your thumb through here. I think maybe that was another one that I had. Anyway, so you can sort of do the have the whole thing hanging off your hand. Look like a real artist. Yeah, you can put your finger through there. So that's 2 of my watercolor sets. And I also carry a big thing of colored pencils because I use those quite a lot in conjunction with watercolor. And so another thing is also I carry around a dip pen, which is a handle with a steel nib. And you'd think being out in the field, if you don't want to deal with, the usual things, which is like carrying around bottles of ink, which it's not that much of a big deal to carry around a bottle of ink like this. But I also have this, which is a very simple thing. It's basically a piece of wood with 4 holes drilled into it, and each one holds a little capsule like this that has ink inside. And you can have different colors of ink too. And you can just dip your pen right into that. So I like to take notes with my dip pen. I like to draw with my dip pen too. So that's a way of just making it fast and portable and, being fancy. So that's my gear. All right, cool. So let's talk about the quality of stuff. I try and get good quality stuff, but a lot of times I feel like I'm rushed. I feel like David, you in particular, are just much more thoughtful and process-oriented in how you make stuff. I tend to just kind of grab things as I'm walking down the street, and I pull out my sketchbook and I just sort of sit down and do stuff. And I haven't customized my palette. I'm sort of a little embarrassed in front of you guys to admit that. I basically use what it comes with. But I'm very picky when it comes to sketchbooks, and I'm pretty picky when it comes to watercolors. I think I started out by thinking, well, I'm not that good. I'm kind of new to it. I should just buy the cheapest ones I can. And man, it sucks using cheap watercolors.
Yes.
Right?
Or
It's
anything.
like, yeah, cheap. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are things you could probably get away. I'm trying to think like what art supplies could you use that were cheap? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my kind of thought on that is that I feel like, and I think this comes from the fact that I grew up around gas stations. My dad owned gas stations, so there were tools. There were tools there, and I think of painting as very blue collar. You could look at it either way, but I think it is. I'm making something out of nothing with mud, basically. When I'm using paint, I'm using mud. I mean, that's it's glorified mud. It's the hair of some animal. I mean, it's all really the cotton to make paper. It's all very elemental stuff. And I think of it as tools. And I think of things I do around my house to repair the house. It's much easier if I have a quality tool. If I have a tool that doesn't work well, the job is harder. What I'd say about that further, though, if we look at my overhead view here, I've got some paper here, and David, you're well versed in this as well, so please feel free to jump in. But these are new. This is a new paper range from Winsor and Newton that is just making its way to stores now. And if we look here, the very light gray cover, like this one and this one, are what you'd call your introductory range of paper. And the one with the darker gray that also says professional is your professional grade one. And my thoughts, and this could be argued a bunch of different ways, but my thoughts are, if you are going to the store to buy supplies and you want to buy the best possible, but you go and you look and you say, I've got my professional brush, got my professional paint, and here's my professional paper. I can't afford it all right now. I simply can't. My thought is go with the professional grade paper first.
Really?
And the reason I say that is because the paper itself, to me, when I'm working with acrylic or oil on a surface, if you ask me, Jimmy, would you rather have cotton duck canvas or Belgian linen? Listen, I'll go with Belgian linen. It's got a beautiful feel to it, but it's much more pricey. And the way I think about it is your acrylic paint sits on top of your surface, your oil sits on top of your surface, but with watercolor, it becomes part of the surface and it becomes integrated with that surface. So I feel like watercolor paper, and to your point, Danny, with Sketchbook, that's really important because it becomes an integral part of the artwork and of the supplies. And a good quality paper is going to help you out. Now, this professional paper is made on what's called a cylinder mold machine. So it is a cylinder, and the paper pulp comes up onto the wire mesh that's on that cylinder. And Danny, if you go back to front facing camera for me, I want to show everybody something. I got a hand gesture here. Okay, so your cylinder mold machine rotates at about 20 meters per minute. And when that rotates, that's pretty slow, 20 meters per minute, so about a foot a minute. And when it picks up the paper fibers, the cotton fibers, what it does is it crisscrosses them this way. And that makes for a really strong paper because it's crisscross. Same sort of thing if you put two pieces of wood together with nails. If you drove the nails straight down, it would hold, but it'd be easier to pry apart. If you crisscross the nails as you drove them into the wood, that would be much harder. So that cylinder mold machine crisscrosses the fibers and makes it very strong. Your introductory range or your student range is often made on what's called a Fordrenais machine, and that moves at 1600 meters per minute, way faster than 20. And that makes the fibers, it jostles them, that speed jostles them into place to line up rather than crisscross. So it's going to be a less structurally sound paper. Now, the good news, and Danny, you can go back to the overhead. The good news is with the professional paper and your introductory or student range paper, those are both internally and externally sized. So what that means is while the pulp to make the paper is wet, there's a sizing that's introduced to that, and that tempers the absorbency of the paper. So I want everybody watching this to think about a paper towel, right? It's the most absorbent piece of paper you could probably get. The commercials will have you believe that one paper towel will sop up a gallon of water. That's how absorbent they are, and that's a quality that you want. But you can imagine with your watercolor paper, you want it to be the right amount of absorbency, not too absorbent, otherwise it soaks in quick and it's hard to make a wash across that paper. So it's internally sized during the paper making process, and then when it dries, it's externally sized to give you the optimum absorption rate for the paper. So that's just a kind of a quick overview. You've got your, this is great for whether it's plein air or I do like my hard cover book here, but it's nice to be able to open up a spiral bound pad like this, or a lot of you will like, as I do, a watercolor block where the sides are all glued except for this corner where I can put a palette knife in there and open that up, and that keeps the paper from buckling. And then this one I want to show you, this is pretty cool. And this is your more introductory student range one. It's watercolor postcards. So the back of it has got your stamp, your place for your stamp, your address, and your writing already on there. And what I love about that, you can be traveling, make a little sketch, send somebody a handmade note. They'll probably be shocked to receive something handwritten in the mail, but with a little art on it as well. And since it's going to go through the mail, it's going to get dinged up a little bit, which I think is fun and adds to the history of it. It's nice to have the more affordable paper in there. And then, kind of same thing with your brushes. When we look at these are the new Winsor Newton synthetic sable brushes. So for anybody who wants to avoid animal hair, these are synthetic. And when we do testing on these, we get kind of crazy about it, or I should say I do, and I think the other people who test. If you saw my studio, the wall was filled with about 20 such pages. It almost looked like a Law and Order episode when they finally catch the madman. I mean, you can see all these minute marks because I want to make sure it really holds a point. I want to make sure that it holds enough paint to make a continuous mark all the way across the surface and back and forth and back and forth. And then same thing with the bigger brushes right here as well. So there's a lot of testing that goes into that because you can test for the spring of the brush, how much it springs back into shape, how much it holds an edge, or how much it holds a point. But you really need to just start working with it as well and abuse it a little bit to make sure you understand or know that it will hold up for the abuse that people will put it through.
What do you think, David? Do you agree? Should we use good stuff
Yeah,
or
well,
just
yeah,
grab any old
yeah,
stuff?
fundamentally, but I'm gonna offer one not contrary, but view around where you should spend your money. Um, I think that it's remarkable how the quality of the materials will enhance your process. Now, you can make art from anything. You can make art from mud. You can make art from with a stick. You can articulate and create an expressive process that is illuminative with anything. That said, when you're making the stuff that we're making, and when you're working with these materials, there is a very real and very tangible difference that comes with quality products, whether you're talking brushes, paper, or color. And um, my suggestion when people have asked me where should I spend my money has been just very simple around buy the best that you can afford. I realize that some of this stuff is expensive and you can't afford all of it, and that's just the way it is. However, I do think that it's worth, if you're on a tight budget, it's worth looking at your colors and recognizing that you can probably accomplish more and enjoy the process more if you buy just 4 or 5 artist quality colors as
Mhm.
opposed to 12 or 15 student grade colors. That's not to say student grade colors can't also deliver many of the things that you're looking for, but the things that we've been talking about, the granulating qualities, the opacity and the transparency, the color intensity, all of those things you're going to get from an artist quality color in a dramatic in a degree that's dramatically different than a lesser grade color. So I'd say when you're managing a budget, think about buying fewer but artist grade. I really like what Jimmy has said about paper. Paper, and in fact, this is something I want to do another Q&Art on. Danny, is I want to talk more about paper because paper has been really, of all the things that I've fallen in love with in my career with art materials and then also as a publisher, paper is pretty much the top of the list for me because there's so much personality, so much character. So again, buy the best that you can afford, and if you can, always buy mold made because you are going to get a much higher quality, and you get a kind of there's the character of the paper will inform your work. There's a dialogue. There's kind of a sensual dialogue that happens with good quality paper that really shows up in your work. And with brushes, thank goodness there has been so much work and so much development with synthetic filaments over the last years that unfortunately natural hair brushes are going up in price for lots of reasons, but they're increasing in price dramatically. But there are so many really good alternatives in synthetic filament that you can buy a really good brush that's reasonably priced.
I think that's good advice. I would also add a couple of other things, which is unfortunately the the higher quality line, like at Winsor Newton, they're called student grade and or Cotman, and then there's professional grade. And you might say to yourself, "Well, I'm not a professional. I don't know if I ever will be one. I'm a student, so therefore let me go and opt for that." And that's fine. I think you will fairly quickly find the limitations of it, or you will. What don't want you to do is to be limited by your materials and then blame yourself and to say, you know what, I can't use watercolors. I don't know how to do it. Watercolors are really hard. Look at how drab what I'm doing is. Look how uninteresting it is. This is an investment, I think, buying better quality. And I think, as David said, you don't have to buy, hundreds of dollars worth of paints, but buying a few and seeing the difference, or try that. Try buying one color at one price point and the same color at a different price point. That could be like a $5 range, and you'll see what the difference is and see if it matters to you. But I think it's really important that you say to yourself, you know what, I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in developing my skills as an artist. And so even though it seems like a little bit of a thing to go over, a little bit of a hump to cross in order to start working at this level, it will help you to make more art. It will help you to love making art more, and that will help you to make better art. So I think that that's an important thing to consider. Also, what I find with particularly with watercolors, you can buy a set of watercolors and they can last you forever, it seems. In fact, I would say it's sort of a strange thing because you can buy a set of watercolors, it can last you for 2 or 3 years. One of the problems you might be having is you're not watercoloring enough. You should be getting through it faster. And if you're watercoloring a lot, then great. It's a great investment. So think about that. Think about it's like buying yourself a good pair of shoes, buying yourself, a good sweater. It really does make a difference, and it will really last you for a long time. And certainly, I mean, all three of us have relied on Winsor Newton for many years and find that it's really the quality that makes it more fun as well as making your art better. Any final thoughts, guys? We've had so many interesting parts of this conversation, but I'd love any closing thoughts you have. Jimmy.
Yeah, I think in talking about the materials like that, one of the things that I think you can do post pandemic, maybe we can get together with your friends on an afternoon, get your kits out and see what you have. Some of you probably have professional colors and student colors, and you might have, one of you might have the professional color. And one of you might have the student color in the same specific color. You can do a little side by side comparison in your sketchbooks, and see if it makes a difference for you. Notice the difference that it makes. And also, one of the things you can do too, if you've got your student grade colors and you want to sort of level up to your professional grade, I would suggest look at the series number on the tube, and the series 1 numbers, which are the less expensive pigments. You probably won't see a huge jump in price from the student to professional grade for the quality you'll get. Higher series number for the more expensive paints, you'll see a significant jump. But start with the series 1 and just test things out. But to David's point, yeah, it's a great one. Go with less. I tend to try to live my life that way anyway. Rather than buying a whole lot of cheap clothing that falls apart, I'd rather buy something that I spend more money on and is quality and will last. And I think the same can be true of your art supplies.
David, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to come back to something that I said earlier about plein air painting saving my art making life, and a lot of that has to do with, I think, what really is for me, not necessarily for everybody, but for me, the heart of making art is not necessarily to produce a quote unquote good painting, but it's to be fully immersed in the moment, in the process. You find a part of yourself. You find a way of connecting with your environment. I find when I'm painting outdoors that I don't find any other way. It's very meditative. It's all tied in with mindfulness. That's language, and those are words that are coming up in lots of other contexts in today's culture and communities. But I find that I reach a state of mindfulness and in the momentness when I'm painting that is extraordinary. And when it's outdoors, I can look through my stacks and stacks and stacks of paintings, and I can remember what the air smelled like. I can remember the people that wanted to come up and talk with me. I can remember what the coffee tasted like when I was sitting in a cafe next to Notre Dame doing paintings of the gargoyles in Paris. I internalize all of that in a way that for me is really, really profound. And that's what I think plein air painting and painting or art making in general, at least for me, that's what it's all about. I don't care whether or not I make a good painting. This ties into a question that Molly Barnes, one of our attendees, had asked in the chat, which was, how do you get over the self consciousness of people wanting to look at your work? Well, making art is magic. It's you're taking mud, you're taking these inanimate objects, and you're putting them together in a way where you're creating a universe. You're creating an environment. You're creating something out of space and time. And if that's not magic, I don't know what is. And I find that the less I worry about whether or not I'm making good art, the more I can enjoy the process and enjoy being me. And then usually that means that I make a couple of pretty good paintings.
Fantastic. I love that advice. I want to thank both of you guys. David is a plein air expert and is going to be teaching a workshop for us on plein air. You're in the middle of producing it right now. That is going to be coming out in a couple months. Jimmy is an expert on so many different things, but he has been part of our Q&Art series before, and I'm sure we'll be back to talk about stuff again in the future. Q&Art Live is a monthly series that Sketchbook Skool produces. It is free. This particular thing that we're doing right now is a re-recording of an event that we had before. Normally we have a live audience, which you are welcome to be a part of, and you can submit questions and we will answer them live at our next workshop, which is going to be coming, and next Q&Art, which is coming up, well, next month. So stay tuned. Check in with us. We'll let you know the specifics of it, but it's free to the public, and it's always on a different art and art supply related topic where we go deep, usually for 90 minutes, and really show you stuff, tell you stuff, take your questions, and try to explain things as much as possible, because the more you know about your materials, the more pleasure you'll get out of art making, the less confounded you'll feel, the less you'll blame yourself, and you'll understand what role your materials are playing in your process. So it's really valuable. We make it fun, we make it interesting, and we want to make it for you. So tune back in with our next one. I think we're going to be sharing this one on YouTube probably, so anybody can watch it. Yeah, so great. And thanks again to Winsor Newton for making great products, but also for funding today's workshop. And we love working with you guys. So thanks very much.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Hey, take care, everyone. Thank you so much.